Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be showing you the steps that you need to take to evaluate a product when you're doing your Amazon FBA product research. So when you're a beginner, finding a product is probably the hardest part of Amazon FBA. So I'm going to break it down step by step so you've got a framework to follow. So I'm going to be using these garden kneelers as an example, as I think it's a pretty decent niche to look at, and it's actually something that we considered in the past. So just one key point here before we dive in is that I would recommend that you stop thinking about product research as, well, product research, and start to think about it as niche research, or even brand research. You're evaluating entire niches for where you can come in with a new brand. You're not just looking at individual products. We also need to remember about patents, so I won't go too in-depth about this here, but always be conscious that you need to do a check for a patent with any products that you're looking at before you place an order. It's an expensive mistake to make if you don't do this. All right, so let's take a look at the individual steps. So these are going to be the things that you need to do every single time you do product or niche research. The faster that you get at doing them, the easier it becomes to find attractive niches. So the first step is to check if there is enough demand. Now, this is the basis of absolutely everything, and it's pretty easy to do with a tool like Helium 10, which we just happen to have a 50% discount code for in the video description. All you need to do is make sure that you're searching one of the main keywords for whatever product it is that you're looking at. Then you need to take a look at the top 15 to 16 listings to see how much revenue that they're doing. Now, one of the things that you need to consider here is your budget. If you only have, let's say, $6,000 or $7,000 to spend on stock, and you're looking at a niche where the top 5 to 10 sellers are doing over $100,000 a month, you're never going to be able to compete and keep up with their sales velocity. So even if you launch the best product ever and it flies off the shelf, you won't have the budget to keep it going. So make sure that the niche has a good level of demand, but also make sure that the demand is in line with your budget. A good rule of thumb here, for example, is if you're aiming to launch a product and do $20,000 a month, then you want to find a niche where the top 1 or 2 sellers are doing maybe between $35,000 and $45,000. And then there's also a bunch of people that are in the $10,000 to $20,000 mark. So at this point, you can aim to come in and do maybe $20,000, $30,000 without a crazy budget. You also need to remember at this point to check and make sure that the demand isn't seasonal. So does it completely die over the summer, but then it peaks massively in the winter? It doesn't always mean it's not a good niche to enter, but make sure that you're aware of it by checking the keyword search volumes and the sales volumes throughout the year. All right, so let's look quickly at our example of the garden kneeler niche, right? So I would search the main keyword here and check the revenues with Helium 10. So you can see at the top end, we have people here doing big numbers, and there's a really good spread of revenue across the board. It's not just 1 or 2 people at the top that are making money. So this means that this product very healthily ticks the demand box. All right, so next up, we need to start assessing the level of competition in the niche. Now, this is where you need to really remember that we're not just looking at individual products, we're looking at niches. So we need to be looking at who we'd be competing against. So going back to our example of the garden kneelers, we need to look at the top 10 to 15 players that are all making good revenue, and we need to check, how good are they at Amazon? So obviously we need to look at the review counts, right? But this really is just one part of the puzzle. Honestly, these days, it's pretty difficult to find a niche with a good demand where the review counts are really low. If you do, then it's probably a trending product or something that's really new, which honestly isn't always a good thing to go into. So what we advise to do is to look much deeper than just the number of reviews. Really get a feel for the quality of the listings and the products in the niche. Are there any obvious flaws in the designs of most of the top sellers, for example? Does everyone look exactly the same? So with our garden kneeler example, you can see that the vast majority of these products and the brands, they look almost identical. The same shape, the same size, the same color, roughly the same price. None of them really stand out as different. Also, one of the big things that we look at this point is the quality of the listings. Are they made with amazing product photography, great copy, great branding? Or are they poorly made, with cheap, cheesy Photoshop and just crap photos? One of the key things in able to compete is that your listing looks and feels way better than the average seller in the niche. So really dive in deep and get a feeling for the overall level of competition and the quality of what they're doing. Now at this point, there is an advanced step that you can do here, which is using a tool called KW Dominator. So this will basically show you how well the competition ranks organically. So I will do a video on this at some point as it needs a full explanation in itself, but you can check out the link in the description if you want a little bit more information on how to use KW Dominator and basically what it's all about. So the next step here is very similar to assessing the level of competition, and it actually goes pretty much hand in hand with it, right? So at this point, we've verified that the demand's there and that the level of competition isn't crazy high. So what we need to really start looking to do is look very deeply at how we can differentiate. Now we like to break differentiation down into two different parts. The first one is visual differentiation and the second one is value differentiation. So you need to be thinking, if I was to launch this garden kneeler in this niche, how would I stand out visually? What can I do to get people to click on my listing over the others? So when you start to think in this way, it becomes a habit and you get used to doing it as you're browsing around Amazon. So the next part of differentiation is value differentiation. How are you actually going to give more value to the customer? Are you going to find and fix a common problem? Just like when we were evaluating how competitive the niche was, we really need to dive into the reviews and the questions on these listings and see if we can spot anything that we can fix or improve that's going to appeal to the customer and really help us stand out. Now, if you think about competition and differentiation, right? The more of a USP or differentiation that you have, the less the competition within the niche matters. So in theory, if you have something that nobody else offers, then you can enter almost any market. But that's obviously pretty difficult. So the sweet spot for any niche is when you can find a market where there's a really good demand, the competition isn't crazy, and you can stand out visually, but you can also adapt and change the product to bring more value. If you manage to do all of these things, then you're onto an absolute winner. So this really comes down to research, really understanding what the customer is looking for, and if and where there are gaps in the niche or the market for you to bring something new to the table. So if we take a look again at our garden kneeler example, we'll see some reviews like this. So this fella is actually really happy with the product, right? But he makes a recommendation for how it can be improved. So what you could do here is you could find a supplier and you could present this as a problem and you can see what solutions they might have to fix it. So you need to go through all of these top listings and look for things like this that are going to spark some creative ideas for how you can differentiate, bring more value, and stand out in this niche. So the final part of evaluating a product is to make sure that it makes sense economically. If you have an amazing idea to stand out in a niche, but you can't compete on price and can't get a good enough ROI, then you honestly just can't launch the product. So with our own stuff, right, we aim to have an ROI of at least 90 to 100%. So that's after all costs, including your PPC. So this is crucial, honestly, that you get this right, because if you end up launching something and your ROI after PPC is less than 100%, then you're going to struggle and almost find it impossible to grow the business without investing more cash into it. All right, so at this point, we've got some good ideas for how we can stand out and improve the product. And we don't think the niche is too competitive. So we need to head over to a site like Alibaba to start looking at rough prices for what currently exists. What you'll find with almost every product now is that you're going to struggle to compete on price almost always. Chinese sellers are everywhere, and honestly, they can just get better prices than you'll ever get. So this is where you really need to focus on having better branding and a better product so that you can charge a higher price than the Chinese, but still sell well. So from here, you need to start reaching out to suppliers, telling them your ideas for customizing the product and getting prices for different order amounts. It's always a good idea to ask for quotes for different amounts. So ask for a quote for 1,000 units, 3,000 units, and then 6,000 units, for example. This is to see how flexible your supplier can be with pricing. You also need to be getting the full dimensions of a product and the number of units that can fit into shipping cartons so that you can get a shipping quote from a freight forwarder. So I actually have a full video on how to contact suppliers and what to ask here. So go and check that out if this part is still, a little bit confusing, as it can be quite difficult in the beginning. So you need to remember that the shipping cost of a product is massively impacted by the number of units that you can fit into a shipping carton. So for products that are small, maybe you can fit in 50 individual units into a box to ship to Amazon, and that's going to be pretty cheap. But then for bigger items where, let's say, for example, you can only fit 5 in a carton, it's obviously going to be way higher. I'm not going to go through exactly here how you calculate a product ROI, as we'll cover that in another video, but you just need to make sure that you're including every single cost. Now in the FBA Blueprint course, we do have a full ROI calculator that breaks all this down for you, but there are others available out there that you can get for free, or obviously you can just make your own in Excel or Google Sheets, whatever you want to do. So obviously you need to look at the unit cost, the cost of the shipping, your duties cost, any 3PL, pickup costs, all of that stuff. Basically every single cost you need to evaluate at this point and work out how much it's going to cost you to get your product from China or wherever you're buying it into the Amazon warehouse. All right, so that's basically end to end how you need to evaluate a product. And it might seem a little bit complicated at first, but honestly, the more you go through these steps, the faster it becomes. And you can really do product research or niche research super quickly and find a lot of opportunities. So I'd recommend checking out my video here with some juicy tips on product research, as it's probably going to help you out a lot if you enjoyed this video. So I will see you in the next one.